Hello and welcome to another edition of Some Locks and History. Today I will be essentially giving a brief summary of the Battle of Samar, or the Battle off Samar, which is part of the much larger Battle of Leyte Gulf, but is perhaps the most impressive American naval victory like nobody outside World War II history or history in general has ever really heard of. And it's why I have a bunch of Master Lock number 3s here. It's Taffy 3 versus the Japanese Center Force. Now, Taffy 3 consisted of 3 escort carriers, which are very small, comparatively cheap aircraft carriers based on the hull of merchant ships. They're essentially a budget carrier where you can place a carrier where you really don't want to put a full carrier, but you still need the air support. And Taffy 3 escorted these 3 characters were 3 fleet destroyers of the Fletcher class, and 3 destroyer escorts, which are effectively budget destroyers where you want the ship to be able to escort effectively merchant ship convoys, and you didn't want to spend a destroyer doing the task. So you effectively had a budget task force. And this was there to provide air support to the invasion of Leyte and anti-submarine patrol. They would face in this battle, as I said, Japanese Center Force, which had 4 battleships. I think it was like 8 heavy cruisers, don't quote me on that, and close to, if not a dozen destroyers. And for scale, they had 2 Congo-class battleships, which could probably more accurately be described as battle cruisers. They didn't have the armor of a full battleship, with 8 14-inch guns. The normally very impressive Nagato, with her 8 16-inch guns, and the largest battleship ever constructed by humanity up to this point, the Yamato, who on her own displaced more than all of Taffy 3, and her turrets outweighed a Fletcher-class destroyer. She had 18.1-inch guns. This is being stubborn number 3 here. Being stubborn, I will rake you instead. So, yes. Effectively, Taffy 3 had no business being in the same water as the Japanese Center Force. And so the Jeep carriers, which was another terminology for the escort carriers, turned into the wind, launched every plane they had, regardless if it was armed or not, and then ran as fast as they could away, which is not very fast, covered by destroyers setting up smoke screens. The destroyers and destroyer escorts then went into an attack, and one destroyers, the Johnston, his first torpedo salvo took down a heavy cruiser and forced another to, temporarily at least, break off the engagement and provide assistance to its fellow heavy cruiser. This is being very stubborn. I'll move on. And this, combined with the fact that the Japanese had no identification charts for escort carriers, convinced the Japanese admiral in charge that they were fighting actual fleet carriers, and by size comparison, the destroyers were cruisers. So pretty much for up till the end of the engagement, with very few exceptions, they're shooting armor-piercing shells at the American ships, which really saves the Americans' bacon. Because these ships don't have armor. There's nothing hard enough in any of these ships, with the exceptions of the turbines and the propeller shafts, to actually set off the fuses on any of these things, these armor-piercing shells. So you'll get very big 14, 16, and the occasional 18-inch hole go through a ship, detonate in the water on the other side, and not set any, and not blow up in the ship where it can do the most damage. Don't get me wrong, a bunch of 8-inch holes in the side of your destroyer is still, putting it extremely mildly, horribly inconvenient, and still very deadly. It's not actually going to sink the destroyer. And over the course of this battle, the Americans make a complete nuisance of themselves. The point where the Japanese learn this isn't the, through other means, learn this isn't the Americans' main carrier force, and that their southern force had been annihilated the night before, so the center force is on its own. That convinces the Japanese admiral to effectively turn around and go home. And this is at the point where Taffy 3 has effectively one destroyer still afloat, and calling it combat capable is very much an extreme stretch at that point. And for more details on this, I actually recommend the book Last Stand of the Tin Can Sailors. It goes into far more detail about this battle, and you'll get a sense of just how truly incredible this engagement was. So I will leave this little tale the same way I've always ended conversations that I've had about this. When you are asked to pick a favorite battle, is why hasn't this been turned into a movie yet? Subscribe if you like, and most importantly, have a nice day.